Mark Mullinex here. Where are we? The 74th lesson or verse of Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu's collected wisdom and teachings about how to live, thrive, or govern, which are all about spiritual practices of walking lightly upon this planet. In other words, Wu Wei. There are ways to be conscious that are friendly and cooperative to the rest of the millions of species and to the still untold millions of processes that keep this planet and universe going. We can flourish in ways that bring, think about it, ways that bring life, blessings, peace, and harmony to us without even consciously realizing it. Why? Because these ways are unconsciously rooted in us and we in them. These connections of thriving are who we are naturally. And one more time, and this time with feeling, we are not born violent, ego-driven, hating, and so forth. We can experience and then hold on to these things, yes, even from day one of our lives. Yes, we can be born into unnatural temporary conditions. And yes, we can also be so carefully taught to see things as somehow, quote, natural, unquote. What I suspect, though, is our natural brain neuroplasticity is just adjusting to whatever conditions into which we were born. And that's what the brain does. It adjusts. Any of us can get very adjusted to living an unbalanced and unharmonious life, adjusted to injustice, adjusted to all kinds of imprisonments of our naturally free selves. We can forget about the very webs of balanced life and the harmonious chemical, biological, cosmic, and physics that keep us alive. And we can get adjusted to being forgetful. But the good news is that Tao Te Ching is the wisdom. First, to interrupt the amnesia, and second, the returning to our senses of our true status. Tao Te Ching is a reminder of who we really, at our roots, are.
When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. The sweet sound of the river as she moves over the stones. The same song that the blood in your body sings as it weaves around your bones. When you're listening, are you listening?
Every moment is fragile and fleeting, says Hua Hu Ching, verse 21. The moment of the past cannot be kept, however beautiful. The moment of the present cannot be held, however enjoyable. The moment of the future cannot be caught, however desirable. But the mind is desperate to fix the river in place. Possessed by ideas of the past, preoccupied with images of the future, it overlooks the plain truth of the peace of this very moment. The one who can dissolve her mind will suddenly discover the Tao at her feet and clarity at hand. The human mind, a wondrous piece of human equipment, is our friend and our enemy. As our friend, when emptied of ego, or the need to control, or to keep open that spigot of 100 thoughts per minute that keeps us anxious. Absent all these, the brain settles into peace naturally, like a pond left alone without our hundreds of little thought rocks that we might pitch into it. However, that same brain is our adversary when we don't consider it an empty space, but a space we fill up like a house. Stuff here, crap there, rubble downstairs, a mess upstairs, a junkyard instead of a yard, which is a kind of horrible way to live. So, with this intro and setup completed, I'm now going to read the verse. Notice how it talks about death, which is this verse's word for both actual physical death and it's a stand-in word for practices that lead to death on some level, like our untamed desires, our unmanaged cravings and addictions. But please notice first how in the first line there's the possibility of not naturally dreading death. In the second sentence, we encounter the concept that one must be carefully taught about death, meaning when we get taught about death by someone, some culture, some religion, and we are schooled to fear and dread it, that's a strange experience, and it's curious to consider death instead of some natural part of existence, but to regard death as something always to be dreaded. Anyways, think of death in this verse not as the terror it may hold for some, but as any good thing about us that dies or disappears through bad habits, cravings, inattention, and forgetfulness. Verse 74, no delusions. When people do not naturally dread death, no one gains by threatening them with it. Suppose they're taught to dread death, and then someone who breaks the law meets their just executioner. Who might dare break the law then? That executioner is appointed for justice. To usurp heaven's ways is no different from trying to impersonate a skilled carpenter with his tools. It is likely the first thing you'll do is cut your hand. Class, we live in a wondrous, jaw-dropping universe, but we can get addicted to things, and so filter out this amazing time and place where we live. To illustrate, this verse brings up something I remember vividly, the day I was taught to dread death. It was the 1960s. I was 6 years old. It was the day my older brother came home from school one day, breathlessly declaring that overpopulation is going to get us all. Too many people for a small planet. Many will die. What's more, my brother declared, his voice getting lower and conspiratorial, the government may have to start killing people to bring the population down. That one thought gives me chills this very second, that the government selecting people for death, it just chilled my young soul for years. Facing for the first time my possible death at age 6, a violent death at that, well, it lowered my happiness. It limited my horizons and depressed me. That was the moment I was taught to dread death, and my young brain filed it away. Fear, terror, doom, which naturally dovetailed with the only religion at the time that taught me my death dread was a teaching device. I was going to hell, it preached, to the place of second death, unless I lived a good and moral life. Isn't it wild how one sentence from a sibling can shape an entire worldview for years? So let me turn this around. How often do you think about death? Or when was the last time you remember thinking about it? Did the thought end well, in regret? Or is there, I'll think about it tomorrow kind of Scarlett O'Hara mindset? Does this knowledge of death help or hinder life as we live it? Do we develop awareness about death that only kills us more, like me at age 6? Or can the knowledge of death that is coming keep us wise? The knowledge of one's death can do either. Shut us down and make us afraid to live because we are transient, or it can liberate us in our knowledge of our transience to be fully alive in each possible moment. It might hinge on where and when we are born. Let's take this a step deeper. Not just the awareness of death, but also habits of avarice, greed, delusion, and anger can do the very same thing to us. We get into these bad fugue states of perseverating and repeating in our minds over and over and over about this one all-consuming thought. It could be of our actual death, but it could also be bad brain habits of revenge thoughts, or a game I used to play called What I Should Have Said. Someone untrained in Tao can dwell upon death and get all rigid, brittle, and scared, but a Taoist learns to remain at home in the liberating understanding of natural death and its natural emptiness. We are not at an end in death, but still in the cycle of awareness and life. Where's your head in all this? Oswald Spengler wrote, "The human is the only being that knows death. All other animals become old, but with a consciousness limited to the moment. Only the fully awakened human comes to possess the notion of transience, and every religion, every scientific investigation, every philosophy proceeds from this." We can all do a simple experiment right now. Think of something, a bad habit perhaps, you love to do, and you feel your day is not complete without this habit. Could be a drug, a smoke, a drink, doom scrolling, or always being busy. Imagine a day or maybe worse to imagine, a string of days without that habit? Might the days and nights seem interminably long or endlessly scary as one contemplates life without your habit? An afternoon without your phone that you accidentally left somewhere? Do we panic with despair? How will I spend my time this afternoon without my social media fixes? Let's not forget Andy Dillard's blunt advice. How we spend our days, of course, is how we spend our lives. We are born with nothing. We die with nothing. We come from nothingness, and we go back to nothingness. What do we do with the time we have? The next quote I've spoken here before, but it's so good, and it's from one of my professors. The unexamined life is not a human one, said Cornel West. To talk about human, you must talk of death. What does it really mean to be this featherless, bipedal, linguistically conscious creature born between urine and feces in that funky, pushing place, knowing that one day our bodies will be the culinary delight of terrestrial worms? Who are we going to be in the meantime? No one gets out of time and space alive. Do we have the courage really to wrestle with who we are in this time and space? Come, learn how to die so you know how to live. Here's a thought, class. We become a different person when we learn to dread, right? We might start doing just anything. This verse addresses this. To usurp heaven's ways is no different from trying to impersonate a skilled carpenter with his tools. In other words, if we don't live out of our Tao roots, we might try to live lives that are not our own to live. We are not made for, nor are we naturally skilled in, living any other life than the one we have. To try to live any other life is to pursue the unnatural. Worst case scenario, we impersonate an idealized self, but we have not that person's toolbox, and we can hurt ourselves, metaphorically or actually. And that's verse 74's core message. The kinds of dread that we're taught by culture surrounding death, like me at age 6, the kinds of tiny deaths we undergo daily by fears, addictions, and thinking, these are not our nature. And therefore, these fears give us an identity we cannot live without harm. The more we adapt, adjust, and attune to that unnatural, the harder it is to give up clinging to views without a future. That's why I've called this verse spiritual rope burn. We hold on to things, assumptions, ideas, people, habits, dreads, call it all holding on to a dread of death, and suffer rope burn of the spirit. So that core peace that's already in us is in our bodies. What happens when our untrained cultures meet our untrained brains and we get hijacked by our dreads? We can get locked down by dreads, dreadlocks. The peaceful core we're born with gets buried under layers of anxiety the brain has learned. Our brains adjust to its catastrophizing training. Is there any hope? Yes, we can re-overwrite its training by just watching its 10,000 thoughts arise and fall, come and go. No interfering on our part, just watching with curious awareness. It's a skill that increases with practice, that overcomes all the bad habits we have practiced. Just watch these dreaded things emerge and then subside in the Tao as the temporary and unsustainable things that they really are. And we can do this anytime we care to. Lao Tzu tells us why we should care, though. Why? It's who we already are. Peace at the core. Peace core. Do we need any other identity besides our peace ID? No. The Hebrew scripture of Ecclesiastes, the one book in the entire Bible most like Tao Te Ching, has this to say. From chapter 2, I said to myself, come now, I will make a test of pleasure, so enjoy yourself. So I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself everything anybody ever wanted. But then, one day, I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had spent in doing it, and again, All was vanity, a chasing after wind, and there is nothing to be gained under the sun. Class, there's this magic show going on in our heads. We hoodwink ourselves, and we are these incredible self-gaslighters, yet we rarely name this sabotage as a problem. And here is that problem. We think we are a self, an individual, isolated, insulated self with a name, history, and destiny. And we're in this self-produced, self-directed, self-acted movie. And every day we feel this weird responsibility to cultivate that self into something more. Make the movie better with more. Always more, never less. Remember, Tao's math is always subtraction for this very reason. Once we start adding to ourselves, we don't know when to retire or to stop. And we add too much to our insecure, dreading self. This addition is so un-Tao. Our minds are both stage and audience, magician and skeptic, actor and captive. Thinking, which is what this grand magic show really is an illusionist's act where our thoughts and perceptions suspend belief just enough to let the impossible feel real. This magic show, through cognitive distortions, catastrophizing, confirmation bias, and black and white thinking, all ensure that we remain imprisoned by illusions of our own making. Seneca was right. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. But Tao is our exit door, our reminder. You are not the show. We are not our thoughts. We are not our dreads. We are not our habits. The end of this movie, this show, is catastrophe. Maybe we've already practiced this magic show such that we become experts catastrophizers. This is the grand finale of the magic show. Catastrophizing happens when the mind takes a small, insignificant worry and inflates it into an inescapable disaster. An innocent slip of your tongue looms large to become the imagined and inevitable end of a friendship. A mistake at work means inevitable failure. It's a performance where we, the magician, always pulls tragedy from the hat and never a rabbit. When we do make our lives into a replica of our catastrophizing and dreaded thoughts, we do exactly what we're warned about in verse 50. We turn ourselves into bait, a target for other energies and forces to identify and then colonize and then take up rent-free space to get all the way inside us. Whoa. Talk about wormholes. The problem is, once we light this long fuse, once this pattern gets a toehold in the undisciplined brain, the mind plays the same show on repeat, convincing us that each worst-case scenario is not just possible, but inevitable. You've heard of a light show and a sound show, right? What about a thought show? Whatever you call your brain on repeat is just a bad magic show, a show we have produced and rehearsed in our heads and then sold tickets to ourselves for. I mean, wow. And sometimes we keep gaslighting ourselves. We want things to be true that cannot be. We want things to be false that are undeniably real. Emotions hijack logic. The brain is no guide to truth. It doesn't speak truth. It seeks comfort, not uncomfortable truths. But the show must go on, we're told, even if the set is built on sand. Robert Heinlein said this: "We are not a rational animal. We are a rationalizing animal."
When you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, are you listening?
Let's unmask this magician. You know, our minds can play magic tricks on us every day. But the greatest trick of all? Convincing ourselves that we must believe every thought we have. The reality is, thoughts are just passing performances. They only imprison us if we buy their ticket. Paul Coelho: anyone who has lost something they thought was theirs forever finally comes to realize that nothing really belongs to them. But if we believe our own mile-a-minute thoughts, it just destroys our immediacy. Just ask a musician or a trained athlete. By thinking I can make people or situations into cockroaches or royalty. Abraham Lincoln said this, "It is said that an Eastern monarch once charged his wise men to invent him a sentence to be ever in view, which should be true and appropriate in all times and situations. They presented him with these words, 'And this too shall pass away.' How much it expresses, how chastening in the hour of pride, how consoling in the depths of affliction." In our impermanent lives, we build livelihoods, civilizations, and bank accounts on the idea that we shall outlast it all. We even develop these religions that say that our next life is just some sort of continuation of this one. I'm not here to critique or valorize the afterlife you have. I'm here only to inject a bit of Taoist critical thinking into that afterlife show for which we have bought tickets. Tao is the interrupter of any show that teaches and reinvents new ways to dread or fear. Here's how our verse 74 ends. To usurp heaven's ways is no different from trying to impersonate a skilled carpenter with his tools. It is likely the first thing you will do is cut your hand. In our unskilled brains, we can only approximate and barely imitate some skilled person precisely because we have forgotten our own native birthright skills. So maybe the lesson of verse 74 is this. Trust life's built-in justice. Don't try to be the fake carpenter of other people's fate or thoughts. Don't worry about being the fake controller of others. Just let go. Let life do its job. It's called early retirement of the fake. Wu Wei is the way. Here's a helpful idea. Ever notice how our feelings change from time to time, day to day, hour to hour, even minute to minute? Which feeling will take you the farthest? To which one shall we cling? Which one will live the longest? I used to tell my classes this very existential truth. Quote, before I arrived here this morning, I'd already visited a few heavens, but also hundreds of hells. All abject lies, all unskilled thoughts. By 9 o'clock in the morning, my body was already exhausted by all the travel I'd allowed my brain to engage in. I was trying to impersonate someone I was not, and I only cut my hand, metaphorically speaking. I self-harmed my entire being with temporary insanities. Look, I don't mean to be rude, and this includes me too, but we people are a kind of messy bunch. We are like puzzles made of random pieces all stuck together because we're scared that we may fall apart without them. We don't operate from our core strengths or values. The way we think more often resembles something we've seen online or on TV, probably on how we are supposed to feel. Our brains act like computers that only show us the reruns of all the scary stuff we're already worried about. Even the nicest parts of us are shaped by how we've been taught to act. But if something bad happens, like a breakup, losing a job, going to war, getting really sick, it can all fall apart super fast. That's when we realize how easy it is to live in a dream, believing self-produced thoughts and dreads that are just not true. If we stop chasing these fake ideas and take a deep breath, we might find something peaceful in the quiet empty. Not sad empty, but calm empty, like when you finally turn off a noisy video game. And if you look at life with a little wisdom, like from old teachings like Taoism, you'll start to see the world more clearly again. All those fears and wants you thought were you, they're more like glitches in someone else's game, not the real you at all.
When you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, are you listening?
Here's a thought from Alan Watts. Do you know what you want? Exactly what you want? Invariably, you'll get that. But what you say you want or control is out of sync from what it is you are. This is why you meditate, to do nothing for a change, to find in utter pure curiosity where your desire comes from and what that desire looks like. It's not done because it's good for you or to engage in competitive suffering, but because it's fun to watch who you are, realizing that you meditate all the time, but you miss it because you're expecting results. My question that goes along with Alan Watts is, how do you stop the suffering? I have a radical proposal based on a quote by William Blake. If the fool would persist in their folly, they will become wise. Again, if the fool just persists in their folly, they will become wise. So here's a program for becoming wise. Keep on desiring. Keep on dreading. Keep on doing things you're already habituated to do, but do them with a conscious curiosity. What happens if you just keep on and keep on and keep on doing the hallucination racket in your head? What happens? Be curious. Don't you just get exhausted? Tired of being so blinking tired? But this is how you do it. One day, along with a friend, never alone, just overdo just one of your dread habits. But stay curious. Keep on acting consistently on all those hallucinations until their very absurdity and ridiculousness smacks you between the eyes, which is our homework. Develop a curiosity about one habit. Do that one habit. Even overdo it if it's not dangerous. Take someone along with you. Become aware of how stupid tired and stupid exhausted one can get by doing the insane over and over, but expecting a different result. Why change a nonstop life of chasing junk bonds? Because we are not made for junk. Our brains are wired from birth to be one way, the way of peace. We can rewire them away from that peace, and we can rewire the unpeaceful brain back to its original factory settings. Finally, our family-friendly version of verse 74. Let life do its job. If people aren't afraid to die, telling them they'll be punished won't change a thing. If people are afraid to die, and they see what happens when someone breaks the rules, they'll think twice before doing wrong. But life already has its own way of balancing things. Trying to take control of life and death is like grabbing a lumberjack's axe that's not yours to use. You'll just end up chopping yourself instead. So let life do its job and focus on living your own. This podcast remains free, and I hope freeing. Thank you for being here. Thank you, visual artist Audrey Davis and Molly Hartwell, our music artists. We acknowledge that all quotes from my Lao Tzu translation are held in copyright by Fortress Press. May your days begin in non-thinking peace, to become these spontaneous places to cultivate hope in our midst.
When you're listening, are you listening?